The story of the Presentation Sisters, of which I am one, begins in a dark chapter of Irish history in the 1700s. I better put these on. Getting to that stage of life. A woman by the name of Nano Nagle, in secrecy, began to educate the street children of Cork. To educate both Catholic and Presbyterian children was against the law of the land, and this crime could result in punishment by the gallows. Nano established 7 schools around Cork and walked to each of these schools every day. And as she walked the streets in the dark of the Irish winters with her lantern ministering to anyone in need, she became known as the Lady of the Lantern. Her first biographer, Dr. Coppinger, who knew her, wrote this: "How often have we seen her, after a well-spent day, returning through the darkness of the night, dripping with rain, mingled in the bustling crowd, moving thoughtfully along by the faint glimmering of a lantern." In 1775, with 3 of her companions, she began the group of women known as the Presentation Sisters. So the lantern has become a symbol of our mission, particularly of our work of education. Education being used as a tool to help children rise out of poverty, helping to bring about a more just, a fairer society. Our lantern is hanging in the tree here behind me. Can you see it? Yes. Now, 100 years later, in 1783, in a far-off land, now known as Australia, a Catholic priest who was looking after a thriving little town called Wagga Wagga was getting a bit desperate in his work. And this is an extract from his letter to his bishop. This was Bishop Lanigan, who was Bishop of the Diocese of Goulburn, which included Wagga Wagga. "My Lord," he says, "nuns could and should be sent here at once. They would be the salvation of the rising generation of the female portion. One of our most respectable Catholic ladies was visibly the worse for drink in the church yesterday. And they all, young and old, drink like fishes." Things have changed. Your Lordship's obedient servant, Patrick Dunn. The Bishop did send his Vicar General to Ireland looking for willing nuns. This was Father McElroy. You might know of McElroy House downtown. He went over to Ireland, and 5 Presentation Sisters who were in Kildare responded to his request to come to this far off and strange land. I'll tell you a little about their journey. I think it speaks of the calibre of these women. They came in the ship Northumberland. They were lucky they had moderate weather, and it made the trip to the Australian colonies in the record time of 51 days, with the deaths of only 3 passengers. There were hundreds of passengers, so this was a good trip. It landed at Port Melbourne on the 6th of May 1874, and the sisters were able to stay for 10 days with the presentation sisters who had come the year before and established a place at St Kilda in Melbourne. They then, after those days, departed from Spencer Street Station for Albury, and in Albury they were the guests of the Mercy Sisters who had been established there for several days, and after that they left on the last days of their journey. They were accompanied by Father McElroy and his friend Father Patrick Birmingham on horseback. So they escorted the sisters from Albury through the bush to their destination in Wagga Wagga. For 180 kilometres, the sisters were driven along the rough bush track to Wagga Wagga. Gives me the horrors to think about it. Their first stop being Gerodgery, where they changed horses and proceeded to Mangapla Station. Here they were given a hearty Irish welcome by the Cox family and their employees. Now, it's worth hearing the trip from Albury to Wagga described by a traveller on the Cobb and Co coaches, which usually made the run between Albury and Wagga Wagga in 14 hours. This person says, "Let me beg of you to mind the roughest bullock cart journey you have made in India, and the roughest sea passage you have experienced in the chops in the Channel or in the Indian Ocean. Add the discomforts together and multiply by 6. Imagine the results if you can. If you can't, then take the coach from Albury to Wagga Wagga." The sisters were given a great welcome in Wagga. The people saw them from afar off and went to meet them. It was written in the local paper. The sisters arrived about 5 p.m. and were met by a large escort in buggies and on horseback, comprising the leading Catholics of the district. These sisters, I find, extraordinary women. They lived then for 2.5 years in what was the presbytery. The priest moved out and they were given some accommodation by a Protestant lady, actually. So the sisters lived in a small, 2-roomed, ill-ventilated wooden house, which was greatly inadequate for 5 sisters, but in which they were to live through the bitterly cold winters and the scorching summers for these 2.5 years. This struck me. The following day after their arrival, the sisters, under the leadership of Mother John Byrne, began their school with an enrolment of 130 children in the converted stables in the presbytery, of the presbytery. So there they were for those 2.5 years, and in 1876 they were able to be escorted actually up to live in this big convent behind us up here, Mount Erin Convent. I think we have a picture of the calibre of these women who first came and the legacy that they have left us. So they brought the lantern all those miles, which we have been now able to carry. So they began the school here and then the boarding school known as Mount Erin. So we thank these wonderful women for what they have brought to this city. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. They're great stories.